Should you aim for an A1c below 7? Is it dangerous for diabetics to try to get their A1c down into the 5s? And what about a man who went to the gym constantly, lifted weights like crazy, even to the point where he could lift over 300 pounds, and did it for a year, and yet it didn't move his A1c even the slightest bit? What's the deal with that? We'll look at these and other diabetic issues coming up. Well, here's a comment from an astute individual. He writes, contemporary medical practice medicates diabetes to an A1c of 7. In other words, that's about the lowest they want to try to get you to, the lowest they hope for. At that level, it becomes a chronic and progressive disease that will eventually lead to a slow and painful death through one of several of its many complications. The orthodoxy is that this is preferable to putting the disease into remission by achieving a normal A1c through diet. This is madness. Well, I have to agree. I think it's crazy to try to settle for an A1c in the 7s. Now, I know some of these doctors are scared to death that if they try to get you to go lower than that, you'll just give yourself more insulin. You'll end up getting hypos. You may fall down dead from low blood sugar, and their family may sue you. So you say, well, we'll just try to keep it in the 7s. But when your diabetes, when your A1c is in the 7s, you are destroying yourself. For some, it'll come quicker than others, but it is not going the right direction for you. And by giving you medication and by encouraging you to try to keep it around 7, somewhere in the 7s, basically what it reminds me of is someone who's headed, driving in their car, headed for a precipice, headed for some kind of a ravine, and the bridge is out, and you're going to surely drive off the edge of that highway and fall down. Your car will fall into the canyon, and you'll be killed. And then there's a shop on the side of the road that says, stop here, I can fix your problem. So you pull over, and the mechanic puts something on your car, and you start driving again, and you realize you can only go 40 miles an hour, whereas before you were going 70. Now, you're still headed for the bridge out situation. You're still headed for disaster and for the ravine, and you're going to die, but you're not going to get there as quick. So did he do you a favor? Well, yes and no. In one sense, he slowed it down a bit, and you won't die as soon. But on the other hand, if he gave you the impression that this is the best you can hope for, he didn't do you too much of a favor. Or let's put it another way. Let's think about a refrigerator. Most of us have had the unpleasant experience of having something terrible smelling in our fridge, and we realize something has gone bad. And so if you didn't know any better, you might think, well, that's crazy. Refrigerators are supposed to preserve foods, not let them go bad. But of course, a refrigerator really can't preserve something forever. It can make it last longer than it normally would. So you can put a loaf of bread in the fridge and it may last you 3 weeks, whereas if you kept it out in warmer temperatures, it might only last 1 week. So it's helping, but it's not fixing anything. It's just slowing down the rate of decay. And for a lot of people, taking some medication is just slowing down the rate of your diabetic destruction. You're still destroying yourself, but you've slowed the rate down. It may take you 10 years, whereas if you didn't take the medication and you didn't do anything like that, it might only take 5. But better still would be the fridge that just absolutely locks down the freshness and you don't decay at all. Imagine, or your food doesn't decay. Imagine if you put bread in a refrigerator and it was so efficient and it was so designed that your food would never rot. You could keep it in there for 30 years and it would be as fresh as when you put it in. Now that would be a refrigerator I would love to have, but they don't make any such thing. But in some ways, the idea of let's just keep our A1c in the 7s and be content with that, it's just slowing things down, folks. It's not fixing anything. It's not going to preserve you from complications, but it will maybe give you a few extra years. But we want more than that. And so he says this is madness. I have to agree. If there's a way you can fix it through diet to where you don't degenerate. There's two words that are used connected with diabetes by many. One is chronic, which means it's all the time. It goes on and on and on, and it's destroying you in the daytime. It's destroying you in the nighttime. It's with you in January. It's with you in March. It's with you all day long, all year long. That's chronic. It's just always there. And then progressive means it's going to progress. It's going to get worse. So for a lot of people, and sadly even some doctors, describe diabetes as chronic, always with you, and progressive, it's going to get worse. But if you could get those blood sugar numbers down low through a low-carb diet, through some exercise, suddenly it becomes non-chronic because you don't have the diabetic numbers. If you're down to a 5.4 and you go to a doctor and say, "Doc, what am I going to do about my diabetes?" He checks your A1c, 5.4. He checks your fasting glucose, 98. He says, "Well, my friend, you don't have diabetes. With a fasting glucose of 98 and an A1c of 5.4, you just don't have it. Don't ask me, what am I going to do about it?" Well, of course, you know what you would have if you didn't take care of your diet. Sometimes people ask me, "Are you diabetic?" I say, well, if I ate like everybody else did, I would be. But because I don't eat the way everybody else does, my numbers don't indicate that I am diabetic. Okay, here's somebody who left this comment. "I've been lifting weights for a year. Heavy free weights, benching over 300 pounds. Wow, very strong. Squats and deadlifts. I thought I'd give that a try instead of changing my eating habits. I ate whatever I wanted." He says my A1c was 6.5, so the doctor said, okay, no meds needed, just exercise more. So he was already into exercise, already into weightlifting, but now he's going to do it more, thinking that's going to fix his diabetic problems. He says, "I also did cardio work along with weightlifting. Guess what? That didn't change a thing. 1 year later, I weigh the same. My blood sugar is still the same. The only difference is I'm stronger. I can move around easier. Exercise alone didn't work." No, it won't work. I remember when I first discovered I had diabetic problems and I had blood sugar problems. And I remembered a documentary I saw about a Native American people, some tribe somewhere out in the West, where they were almost all diabetic and they were all running like crazy, jogging constantly to try to beat diabetes. Well, exercise is good. I'm not against it by any means. I just don't emphasize it because it is not your major weapon of choice against diabetes. If some giant of a man is attacking you and you have two choices, one is a machine gun and the other is a pocket knife, I don't know about you, I'd go with the machine gun and wipe out that giant. I wouldn't pick up the pocket knife. Now, of course, it's not quite that way with diabetes. We can use every tool at our disposal, every weapon. But it is diet that is the machine gun, and it is exercise that's the pocket knife. Diet is far more important, and many people can get their numbers down with diet alone. And I'm not encouraging that because exercise is helpful in a lot of ways. But metabolic syndrome, to quote Dr. Jason Fung, is a dietary disease. And it requires a dietary cure. So this guy says, I exercised like crazy. I was pumping iron. I was lifting weights. I was doing cardio, doing it all. He says, at the end of a year, I'm stronger than ever before. I've got good mobility, but guess what? My A1c, my diabetic numbers are just like they were before. You've got to change your diet. I mean, I know it might be nice for some to think if I just go to the gym a few extra days, I'll be good, I'll be fine. You won't. You're going to have to change that diet. All right, this is an interesting comment. It's a rather lengthy comment, but I liked it so much I wanted to share it. This, I believe, is from a lady. I'm not positive, but I think so. She says, I went to a diabetes support group at my local library. It was led by a 30-year type 1 diabetic who is a nutritionist. The group was comprised of women, I guess mostly in their 50s and older. I was shocked when these women who were clients of the nutritionist were eating 30 grams of carbs per meal. They were eating English muffins, half bagels, sweet potatoes, fruit and kale shakes, and the justification was it was balanced with vegetables and protein, so that made it okay. I like this. They say, I'm not a shy person, and I guess my reaction was not very welcome. I said, You must mean 30 grams of carbs per day. You surely don't mean 30 grams of carbs per meal. But they said, no, it's 30 grams per meal. And they seemed annoyed when I said I do a keto-type diet and I only eat around 20 grams of carbs per day. In fact, they were not just annoyed, they were shocked. They'd been on their diet journeys for years, and their A1Cs were between 7 and 9, and they were having a hard time losing weight. So they've been struggling for years, floating around in the 7s, the 8s, and the 9s for an A1C. They can't lose weight. And they're still trying the same old, tired answers that never worked in the first place. So this lady tells them, in 6 months, I lost 25 pounds. My A1C went from, get this, 12.5 to 6. 12.5 to 6 loses 25 pounds. And she says their reactions were priceless, but they seem to get very defensive, and that's sad. I mean, if it was me, maybe I'm wrong if I had been committed to that way that long. I don't think so. But if it was me, I'd say, now tell me again, how exactly did you do this? What did you eat? What did you stop eating? Come on, give me some more info here. But instead, she says they got defensive. I think some of them thought I was lying. I quickly shut down. The discussion was steered away. And the nutritionist's word about it all was, well, everybody's different. Folks, that is such a cop-out. Here's a lady that gets phenomenal results, and she's not alone. It's not like this is one freak of nature somewhere that got results and nobody else can duplicate. Everybody's getting results by cutting their carbs and by eating a low-carb, high-fat diet. It's just working for so many. And yeah, everybody's different, but as I've said before, carbs will raise anybody's blood sugar. Keto seemed to be a dirty word, this lady said. I left my head shaking in disbelief. I left realizing I don't need this kind of support because no matter what they said, the results don't lie. Thank you for the common sense advice that you give. Well, anybody who's gone from 12.5 to 6 should be heard, and people ought to listen to a person like that. If I was just starting out in golf and I wanted some advice, I'd go to a pro if I could afford it, and if I could find one that would talk to me and teach me. I wouldn't go to some hacker that's as bad as I am. What good would that do? And yet some of these people that are so opinionated don't even have results for themselves.